Mute. I think I'm on mute. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Obeah. Obeah. And I have to start by giving this a warning. I know we grew up um, with a stigma behind this name. Some of us call it Obeah. Some places in the Caribbean call it voodoo. Today we're going to talk about some people call it voodoo, Obeah, um, all of those stuff. And listen, we're in this time of dispensation. You have to do your own studies. Remember, we were conquered, we were um, what they call it, colonized, and a lot of our history is deemed um, what they call a lot of our history is demonized. A lot of our history is demonized, and they're meant to be seen bad and all that. And we're going to go deeper into it. I was in meditation this morning, and because I was meditating about healing, and I just heard that word came up, Obeah, and I started doing some research, and we're going to go into a reading about what Obeah really is and how it is. And based on what I see, feel in my spirit and in my meditation, it was just energy manipulation. Um, because we're energy beings, it seems as if our ancestors tapped into that realm of energy. And as we know, we create our own, whatever we're going through, we create it, we find it, and they they had the knowledge how to tap into that realm where we create and using energy manipulation. They used it against the colonizers too. So that's one reason why they demonize it that much. They demonize Obeah and voodoo and that. Yes, everything has a positive and a negative aspect of it. So we're going to read. And if you hear this message today, please do go inside yourself. This is where the knowledge is. Let me tell you, we looking as people who has been conquered, looking for our true history is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Let me tell you, you have to understand what you're looking for. Because if I didn't have a knowledge based on what I saw in my meditation, I wasn't even looking. I didn't care what other people said Obeah was. I only cared about what I saw in my meditation, and I tried to find an article to back that up. Because we've been demonized as a society, like we didn't have a history, we don't have anything out there, African diaspora. And I'm gonna say this, if this is, I really don't believe in that that the way slavery was taught. I really don't believe that based on what I've seen since I've come into this enlightenment. It was impossible for that to happen. Today I'll be reading, you will see slave, we'll see Africa, but I do believe that wherever we are, that's where we were. Um, we were in the Caribbean, we were in the Americas. Not saying slaves didn't come to the Caribbean or the Americas, because we were all over the place. The entire continent was majority melanated. Not that totally melanated, was majority melanated. So when we speak of Africa, we're supposed to speak of the earth. That's what I think, and that's my opinion based on everything that I've seen. But in order for us to be conquered, in order for us to be ruled, um, everything was distorted. Everything was made to seem as if we're nobody, or if we didn't have a history. If you listen, meditate, and think about it, a lot of this history doesn't make sense. You think us as melanated beings was only here 400 years ago? We only were in Africa? Please, come on, think about it. Let's question everything. Some things don't make sense. And You have an experience of all Black people. You think somebody can come up and put all these Black people on ship in Africa? Listen, I'm Jamaica. I grew up in Jamaica. I live in America. I see Africans. Listen, we're not that easy to be loaded up on a ship and carried 30 days across the street, across the ocean, 3 months across the ocean. Most of us probably would have died. And who are you? And that's why they came up with this story that our slaves, that our own people sold us. Yeah, they sold us. That's the thing. They sold us, but they didn't sold us physically. They sold us out, yes, to our colonizers, yeah, but not physically. They did soul us, but it wasn't physical. Yes. There was some of us, I don't know who they are, but some people have an idea who they are. I haven't gotten the understanding who, but yeah, we sold out ourselves, but they sold us to the colonizers, but it wasn't physical. It was just giving ideas and giving our secrets and demonize us, and that's helped in conquering us. All right. There's many, 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 many information about all this out there. There's some great people who have been talking about this from a long time. It just don't make sense. And a lot of us grew up with eras too. I know in Jamaica we had nanny. They tell us about nanny. Listen, when you hear names, don't even, but we're gonna go with Nanny. They were just manipulating energy and defeating the colonizers. They had no clue how to use this weapon that our ancestors were tapping into. In Haiti, they just know how to use this energy weapon. They call it voodoo in Haiti. And I know there's a guy named Voodoo Chief. He said Obeah is just voodoo is a French word for Obeah. So it's like everywhere we go, every melanated being have some idea of what Obeah is, have some idea of what about what voodoo is. That is what we were using before the Catholic Church came and brought us the Bible. It's just using nature to our will. We have an idea of everything um was that as Christ, we read in the Christ letters that Christ tell us we're energy beings and we're not solid, we're not this physical aspect of us that our eyes are showing us. No, we're energy vibrating at a certain frequency. And our ancestors knew that. Our ancestors knew that. So they manipulated energy. Yes, sometimes they use it for good, but they also used it for bad. And I think that's also helped in our demise because we I think we forgot who gave us all this power and that authority we had, and we were using it for various things that we shouldn't have to. So it seems as if, like the Bible says, he just gave up on the children of Israel, just gave up on them because they have forgotten the true God. They have forgotten. They were just caught up in it. Weapon was protecting them and everything, and then the father be like, "Go ahead and conquer them, so they can come back to me and know who they truly are." And another thing I'm gonna say, nothing that we hear in history, because you hear me say I don't believe in the slave trade narrative. They always mix the truth with the lie. So nothing is totally truth and nothing is totally lie. Yes, some people came on ships, but is it us? That we have to understand. Yes, we were sold out by our own people. Yes, we were, but was it physical? Or was it just talking and giving away secrets and all that? So everything we learn in history, because you see, here, deep ministry, not everything about this, I believe. Everything is mixed with the truth and the lie. So you can't totally throw something out. And that's why the Bible said, let the wheat and the tears dwell till the day of harvest. Because that's how eventually the wheat have to die down. The tears have to die down. Eventually it will. So the truth has to rise. The truth has to come forward. All right, so today, let's go into this reading. Let's go into this reading. And we're going to read in this book. I don't think it's a book. I think it's an article, 16 pages. I don't think I can do all the pages today. And it's Obeah, Healing and Protection in West Indian Slave Life. I know everything we hear is going to talk about slave. I really don't think it was slave for all indigenous to wherever we're from, for indigenous to the Caribbean, the Americas in a whole, wherever we find ourselves. You're in Europe, you're indigenous to Brazil, North America, South America. So when they use slave, they just using the narrative that they were taught. Okay, so let me tell you who the author is. The author is Kenneth Bilby and Jerome Hansler. This is the best article I found that described what Obeah really was without all the nonsense about how cruel we are and how wicked we are and all that, based on what I was shown in my meditation. All right. So Obeah is not an organized religion. It lacks a more or less unified system of beliefs and practice involving, for example, deities or God, communal or public rituals and ceremonies, and the physical spaces or sites where they occur, or spiritual leaders of congregations, as in Asian voodoo or voodoo. So listen, all of the Caribbean, from all of the I'm gonna try to say Americas. We have a way of describing what Obeah is. Haiti call it voodoo or voodoo. Brazilian call it candomblé. Cuban call it centerfa, or the Orisha religion, formerly known as Shango in Trinidad. Rather, Obeah is a catch-all term that encompass a wide variety and range of beliefs and practices related to the control of channeling of supernatural spiritual forces by particular individual or groups for their own needs or on behalf of clients who come for help. And the author mentioned this in Trinidad, and I certainly think that's what it originally started out as. It started out as this supernatural force, um, this supernatural force by particular individuals or groups for their own needs or on behalf of clients who come for help. Although the specific beliefs and practices embraced by the term varied from place to place, Obeah everywhere shared at least two fundamental characteristics. One, its practice involved the manipulation and control of supernatural forces, usually through the use of material objects and recitation of spells. And two, it was primarily concerned with divination, example, foretelling, finding lost or stolen good, ascertaining the cause of illness, healing and bringing good fortune and protection from harm, although it was sometimes used malevolently to harm others. The practice of Obeah usually involves specialists, often skilled in the use of plant medicines, who are sometimes paid fees by individual clients. The practitioners, as well as their client, could be men or women. And now we're getting back um into that. plant medicine based alternative therapy. We're going back into that. That was part of what was termed Obeah back in the days. That was termed Obeah. And as we see here, the author is saying, yeah, this is what Obeah was using. You go in, you have a problem, um, you you need healing. I know even if your farm wasn't producing the way it was, they would go to the Obeah man and he could perform certain rituals and chants and pray that the earth will come back and be fruitful. Um, you lost something, those are the things. And even the author acknowledged that sometimes, because we're ego-driven people, it could be used to arm others, because that's a society we live in. But the most of it was used um, for good. And it talk about supernatural forces. And I think supernatural forces here means nature, nature. They use nature to achieve whatever they want. The word obia was has several meanings. The most common being medicine, remedy, or healing power. We never taught that. We never taught that obia also mean medicine, healing, medicine, remedy. Okay. Most common being medicine, remedy, or healing power. And if obia is described as that, as this, we can understand why it had to be obia has to die a death, not a natural death, because I didn't even know the in the English Caribbean islands, laws were passed against this. They made sure they passed laws about using this force because they could use it to heal. Now we're using pharmacy pharmacy meds, pharmaceutical medication. How would this go up against these big companies? And that's not even healing. That's not even healing. So many diseases and they're not even healing. So this Obeah had to die. It didn't die a natural death. It was deadly. They tell how bad it is, how wicked it is, how evil it is. If you listen to me, you could Google Obeah on Google and then you can see the things because they didn't understand it. And the worst part, I think our ancestors was using it against the Europeans. There's um there's tales about in Haiti how they used voodoo to like just turn people, the French soldiers, into dust. So it has to be um, talked about in a terrible way, no benefits. And I know grew up in Jamaica. Oh, you're Obeah worker. It's always so negative, always negative. All right. So the word Obeah has several meanings, the most common being medicine, remedy, or healing power. For the Neduka Maroons of Suriname, the term Obeah, the historian Sylvia de Groot wrote over 30 years ago, refers to a supernatural force with healing and protecting magic power. And this is Sri Lanka, Suriname, in Suriname. All over where melanated beings are. There's an aspect of Obeah, maybe known by different names, but there's an aspect of Obeah. Yeah. So this historian refers to it as a supernatural force with healing and protecting the magic power. Virtually all over reliable sources on the Surinamese maroons. Oh, I didn't know they have maroons there too. Included Saramaka agree with the definition of Obeah as a positive form of power that plays an important force in everyday life. Naduka and Saramaka, oral historians say that it was always been so, that they and their ancestors have always known Obeah as a social beneficial force. And these islands have kept their natural history, not like us, like in the Caribbean that's been colonized by the Spanish and the British um and the French. You know, they practice their ancient ancestor um way of living. They still have that oral history passed down, and that was it about us too. There was a lot of oral history. There's a lot of oral history we passed down. It seems as if our ancestors didn't write much because I think they just depend on the force that lives within us to remind us of who we truly are. Just to remind us of who we truly are. So yeah. So the Suriname, they see this Obeah as social beneficial force passed down from their ancestors. The fact that Surinamese Maroons, not only the most culturally African of Caribbean populations, but also the most successful at resisting the imposition of European colonial values, define Obeah as healing and protective power, raises question about the most common meanings given to the term in other parts of the region. Is Obeah an overpowering and extremely evil form of sorcery and witchcraft? As the most recent edition of influential Encyclopedia Britannica would have it. That's a question. That's a question. Let me read that question. Is Obeah an overpowering and extremely evil form of sorcery and witchcraft, as the most recent edition of the influential Encyclopedia Britannica would have it? Is it? Is it? So the author is saying, um, and listen, we didn't write our books. Whoever the books that we read wasn't written by our ancestors. They were written by people who didn't understand our culture. So his point of view that the Surinamese Maroons, the most culturally African of Caribbean populations, who was the most successful at resisting the imposition of European colonial values. These authors using Surinamese is because they were very successful in resisting the colonial powers, so they retain so much of their natural history, so much of their oral history that was passed down from their ancestors. So she's saying these people who retain so much of their history, unlike some of us in the Americas didn't retain our history, they're telling us what Obeah really is. And it says, based on what passed down to them from their ancestors. And if you're here, be like, oh, that's Surinamese. Listen, the Caribbean is the Caribbean. The Caribbean is the Caribbean. It's still we're still the same. We're still same history that passed down from generation to generation. And it says the Surinamese. it um says that Obeah raises question about the most common meaning given the term parts of. Is Obeah an overpowering and evil form of sorcery and witchcraft? As the most recent edition of influential encyclopedia would have it, it is a kind of pretend sorcery or witchcraft, so defined until very recently by the authoritative Oxford English Dictionary. Or is it a kind of healing and protecting magic power? As the Maroons in Suriname will tell you, the truth perhaps lies somewhere in between and must be sought in the complex and convoluted history of slavery and colonialism in the Anglophone Caribbean, and how these have shaped both thought and language in the region. And he called it the Anglophone Caribbean. We who have been colonized by the big British, anglicized, they call it sometimes. He said, we contend that in many, if not most parts of the Anglophone Caribbean, the supernatural slash spiritual force or forces that the Obeah practitioner attempted to control or guide was essentially neutral, but was largely directed towards what the slave community defined as socially beneficial goals. The force could even be directed against slave masters, when from the perspective of many enslaved persons was a beneficial goal. True Obeah would also have negative or antisocial dimensions. However, the entirely negative view of Obeah promulgated by whites during the period of slavery in the British Caribbean, a view no doubt influenced by the fact that it was sometimes directed against them, as distorted understanding of the social role that Obeah played in the lives of many enslaved West Indians and their descendants in post emancipation times. So, yes, so we're getting our history about Obeah from the persons who it was used against. They're not going to tell us how great it was, how good it was. They're not going to tell us that Obeah as some was mostly good, because our ancestors used it against them, and they write the history books, and they don't want us to tap into this power and use it against them and use it against them anymore and use it today. So we can have an idea why Obeah and voodoo and all that was um, talked about in such a negative way. It is hardly surprised that Obeah, when filtered through a colonial and racist lens through documentary evidence, should be seen in exclusively negative terms. European interpretations of Obeah were shaped not only by their racist ideologies, ethnocentric religious beliefs, and their own cultural perception of witchcraft and sorcery, but also by the limited opportunities they had to gain information. And the author was trying to tell us that Europeans didn't understand this aspect of spirituality. They didn't understand this aspect of spirituality. So, because our ancestors probably used it against them, they had to write how negative it was. They couldn't understand it. The supernatural force that was used against them. And these are the people we're getting our information from. Our governments use this information to make laws against Obeah. And I have to say certain, I think Jamaica finally, I think a couple years ago, they got rid of the law that makes Obeah that said no one could practice Obeah. Other Caribbean islands been got rid of that archaic law about not able to practice Obeah. So I'm not sure if all Caribbean country, if you hear this, let me know if you're from the Caribbean or wherever, if laws were passed that these supernatural powers the people weren't supposed to tap into them, into these powers, that a law was passed that they shouldn't be able to practice this. Okay. Um, okay. Okay. Very few Europeans during the slave era, any more than most modern field workers and scholars, actually witnessed the work of opiate practitioners, and such Europeans rarely left accounts of their observations. Moreover, because of their powers, opiate practitioners had considerable spiritual and political influence in slave communities. Obeah could be used as a mechanism of social control. It could become a vehicle through which tensions and antagonisms were channeled and manifested in slave communities. For example, when enslaved persons believed they were bewitched and their lives threatened, and thus ultimately it could threaten the stability of the colonial and plantocratic authority. Also, because the power of obeah practitioners could be used against whites, Europeans in the West Indies constructed a narrow and thoroughly negative theory of obeah, reducing it to a kind of virulent witchcraft augmented by the administration of poisons. So deeply ingrained did the interpretation of obeah become that many West Indians accept it to varying degrees today, although with perhaps diminishing intensity in recent decades. Yeah, this caused the death of obeah and the negativity around obeah because it was a way it wasn't allowed to use, so should be able to control the slaves with it, and so the slave won't rebel. Were to put it nicely, they were scared of it. They were scared of it. They were scared about the power of the ancestors, and sometimes I get that they're still scared about it. They know about it. They know that there's a power that we can tap into and get out of this victimization. Get out of this victimization attitude. Writing about Jamaica, yet in comment that could easily be applied to other West Indian areas, Curtin observed that essentially Obeah was neither good nor bad. It could be used either way. Some years later, Edward Camus Brathwaite departed even further from most scholarly interpretations, which he asserted that Obeah is an aspect of healing and protection. Though it has come to be regarded in the New World and in colonial Africa as sorcery and black magic, the principle of Obeah, he continued, is the process of healing slash protection through seeking out the source or explanation of the cause of disease or fear. And this is what modern medicine does. And this is the difference between Obeah and modern medicine. Because with Obeah and medicine, treat the effect of the disease. Oh, I have blood pressure. What's the cause of the blood pressure? Oh, I have cancer. What's the cause of the cancer? What happened? Why your body got so cancerous? All these diseases, it's just the effect of something, some cause. This is universal law. For every cause, there's an effect. For every cause, there's an effect. And what this author is saying, even the colonialists have to admit that Obeah treated the cause. That's the difference between what we have now and what was happening back in the day. Obeah treat the cause of the disease. What is causing this high blood pressure? What is causing your pain? What's the cause? Your feet is hurting you. That's the effect. Mm, yeah, that's the effect of it. So he said this was debased by slave master missionary Prosper Prosperanto Prosper Prospero. Okay. This was debased by slave master missionary Prospero into an assumption inherited by most of us that Obeah deals in evil. What is evil about it? Yes, everything can be turned out to evil. But we have an opportunity now to understand the knowledge of Obeah. Get into the knowledge of Obeah. Let her higher self teach us. Go within. Too long we've been going by what our colonizers taught us. Those who colonized us, those who colonized has taught us to hate this Obeah. Although some recent scholars have emphasized to one degree or another the socially positive aspects of Obeah during the slave period, historically, scholarship and traditional stressed its antisocial dimensions, relying too heavily, we believe, on Eurocentric and racist perspective of the primary sources or on secondary sources that convey this position. For example, in his influential Sociology of Slavery, Orlando Patterson wrote, Obeah was essentially a type of sorcery which largely involved harming others in the request of clients. For the cultural geographer David Watts, in his monumental The West Indies, Obeah was a type of sorcery or witchcraft, which may be broadly equated with West African bad medicine. You see, all this negativity. Bad Lowenthal, in his now classic cultural geography of the West Indies, gives a definition and briefly, but assuredly states Obeah manipulates evil spirits through black magic. Alberto Roboto is, in his widely quoted study of North America, slave religion defines Obeah as the use of magic for evil, and for Philip Morgan, in his masterly and highly regarded study of slave culture in the 18th century, Chesapeake and Carolinas. You see, even in the mainland, even in America, these things were happening. They knew about it. Chesapeake and Carolinas. That's Virginia, come right down. Sorcery is the deliberate attempt by an individual to harm others by secretive means. The most common term among enslaved persons of North America for sorcery was Obi or Obeah. Yeah, because all this they're writing, they have the intellect, but they didn't have the spirituality to understand what Obeah was. They didn't understand it. Yes, it was used to harm people, especially the slave masters. They were the blunt of this. They got the blunt of this. And I don't really think it was slave masters. It was um, prisoners of war. So many of the negative assumptions in the scholarly literature about Obeah can be traced ultimately to the writings of Joseph J. Williams, a Jesuit missionary and anthropologist whose work, though now largely forgotten, was influential during the 1930s. In his 1932 volume, Voodoos and Obeahs, and a number of other writings, Williams relying almost entirely on Jamaican sources, including the classic works of Edward Long, History of Jamaica, 1774, and Brian Edwards' History, Civil and Commercial of the British Colonies in the West Indies, 1793, presented a theory of Obeah that saw it as transplanted form of Ashanti witchcraft that continued to be opposed in the Caribbean by a kind of white or positive power known as Mayal, though based in the flimsiest of evidence though based in the slimmest, flimsiest of evidence and a naive and prejudicial reading of 18th century sources, this interpretation is still widely and uncritically accepted. Williams' views have also profound affect the search for the etymological roots of the term. See below. And also, I saw this today while trying to research this Obeah thing. Oh, it's from the tribe of Ashanti, and which I do not agree that this came from some Ashanti something from Africa. Obeah witchcraft. I do not believe that. I think it didn't come from a specific place. It was what our ancestors were practicing on a wide level. And also, when the missionaries came, they didn't like it either because they didn't understand it because they can't come in and they want to give the Bible, they want to give the church, there was no establishment of a specific place to worship before the missionaries came to the Caribbean. So of course they're not going to like it. They understand God. They understand who they are. They understood who they are. So although the historical evidence and primary sources for discussion of Obeah in early West Indian slave societies are often very ambiguous, limited, and fragmentary, not to mention highly racist and ethnocentric, they nonetheless, after clues as the relationship between Obeah and its socially beneficial function. Indeed, the very primary sources that provide information on Obeah and emphasize its evil nature commonly indicate, albeit indirectly or implicitly, its positive role in slave communities. Yeah, because they have to tell the truth. They put the lies out first and then they come back with the truth. Witness, for example, a major 1781 Jamaican slave law. Its 49th clause specifically addressed the wicked art of Negroes going under the appellation of Obeah men and women, pretending to have communication with the devil and evil spirits. The law observed now the weak and superstitious are deluded into a belief of the Obeah practitioner having full power to exempt them whilst under the protection from any evils that might otherwise happen. Another examples from 1789 document based on slave testimony, one of the earliest Jamaican sources of Obeah and one of the most detailed of the 18th century. From this document, we learn that the powers known by the name among enslaved persons, though they certainly could be associated with fear and intimidation, had clearly positive side. We are told, for instance, that enslaved person may reverse and therefore revere and therefore consult the Obeah man or woman. We learn further that they put great faith in his or her divinatory capabilities or oracles, which they consult upon all occasions. What they desired from the Obeah man was not just vengeance against enemies or punishment of thieves, objectives, and our perhaps not wholly evil or morally indefensible after all, but the cure for disorders, the consolation of favors, and the prediction of future events. Clearly, the use of spiritual or magical powers for purpose such as these constitutes something more than malevolent sorcery. Yeah, and yeah, it's not gonna be discussed what these things were used for. It's not gonna be discussed that why the oracle was consented, and they can put it in movies though about oracles. Hmm? They could put it in movies, the use of oracles to tell future events all around you. You have psychic, you could read palms. It falls under the same Obeah. And we act as if, oh, we're not practicing Obeah, you know? It's just using nature, using the supernatural events and the knowing of self, knowing of who we are to heal ourselves. Yes, they everything that can be used for God, bad, also can be used for good, also can be used for bad. But it had to be put in a negative light because it couldn't have survived nowadays because it was people were using it to heal themselves and using it to get rid of their oppressors too. It has to be victimized. It has to be. So we are at this time. We have to do our own studies. Autodidactic. I love that name. Autodidactic study. Study for yourself. The earliest unambiguous reference to Obeah in the British Caribbean, of which we are aware, occurs in a Barbadian source. Obeah is mentioned in several letters written between November 1710 and September 1712 by Thomas Waldock, an English army officer stationed in the island, to a correspondent in London. Waldock wrote that one Negro can bewitch another, Obeah as they call it, and that one Obeah witch Negro can cure another is believed here as our country folk do in England. This is a soldier writing and telling other people of what he saw in Barbados with the Obeah man, and Obeah and how they do it in Barbados. What was going on in Barbados. He's telling them um how the Obeah works. As known, he also wrote, upon Negroes complaining that they are bewitched, and Obeah Negro hath taken out of their eyes. Okay, let me read it. I have known, he also wrote, upon Negroes complaining that they are bewitched, and Obeah Negra are taken out of their eyes, bones, shells out of their thighs. In 1729, Arthur Holt, an Anglican rector of Christ Church Parish, reported on their Obeah Negroes of are conjurers and their influence within the slave community. The knowledgeable Griffith used also an Anglican minister who was based in Barbados during the 1730s and 1740s, subsequently observed that slaves stood much in awe of Obeah Negroes, these being a sort of physicians and conjurers who can, as they believe, not only fascinate them, that is, bewitch or lay them under a spell, but cure them when they are bewitched by others. In fact, use unintentionally provides another excellent but not typical illustration of all the very primary sources that condemn, mock, or otherwise deride Obeah provide data that yield an alternative interpretation and indicate the positive role of Obeah in slave life. Yeah. So what they were just writing back and describing what they saw in these slave communities. They talking about the Obeah man, how they were bewitched by him and he was healing um others, and they call him the oracle, and we see that in our movies. We see I can't what's that movie with Keanu Reeves, the Matrix. There's an oracle, that wise black woman in there. That's all coming from back then. All that is not new. This is what they demonize Obeah. This is how they demonize it, because they don't understand it. So, to illustrate the devious influence and chicanery of Obeah practitioners and the gullible of their patient, Hughes described a practitioner who attempted to cure a nigger woman who came to him troubled by rheumatic pains. The woman was persuaded by one of the Obeah doctors and was bewitched, and that he would cure her for a fee. Hughes then described how the Obeah man proceeded to effect the cure he had promised. Several decades after Hughes wrote, a prominent Barbadian planter, John Brathwaite, asserted that Obeah practitioners act now principally as fortune tellers, that is, diviners. Some of them have knowledge in simple herbal medicines and can apply them with success in the cure of wounds. So, this person, Mr. Hughes, was in Barbados and he was just writing and to someone, just explaining how um, what he saw the people does with Obeah. But now he's saying, yeah, Obeah has died a natural death. He said in Barbados, they're just used for fortune tellers and and herbal medicines and in herbal medicines, you know. But I know there it's I don't think it will ever die. It's just who we are. It's just an innate aspect of us. That it's just understanding that modern medicine is just so new, and as the author explained, that modern medicine can is treating the effects, it's not treating cause. It's not treating cause, it's just treating the effects. And that's what the Obeah used the right way can determine the cause of a disease, can tell you why you have high blood pressure, why your kidneys not working, you know. Modern medicine is so expensive, so expensive, so expensive. Just a few can afford it. And when you think about what our ancestors was doing back then, Yes, you probably had a few that would charge for to heal, but I'm sure there's healers there that in the community that would have someone sick. Now I know in Jamaica, you can't, if you have a procedure to be done at the hospital, you have to make sure you have the money before you even go in there. And now we're seeing after these ways of healing has been villainized. Yes, I'm not saying that it wasn't used incorrectly, but it's using the energy in our bodies. Now we have different names for them. We have chi healing, we have Reiki healing, we have energy detoxing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. We're just giving it fancy names. We're just giving it fancy name. It's the same voodoo. It's the same Obeah, but we're calling it Reiki healing. We're calling it chi healing. We're calling it energy cleansing, all those natural health, natural this. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. We People understood, listen, we're not limited to the church. God is inside of us. This is what drew me to, I don't know, this is what my higher self drew me to do a study on this Obeah. Our higher self, whatever we need to heal us is within. It's an imbalance. When we have disease, it's an imbalance of energy within us. It's the imbalance of energy within us. So it causes our blood pressure to go up. It causes cancers. It's an imbalance. Our equilibrium is off. So going forward, we gotta decide if we're gonna continue with the way modern medicine is going, or we're gonna go to the cause of all these diseases. It says, thus, despite the negative view of Obeah and its practitioners emphasizing the primary sources, a critical reading of these sources strongly indicates that Obeah practitioners, some of whom may have been identified as Negro doctors at certain periods, played positive roles within the slave community. They were sought after for their divination ability, proficiency at diagnosing and healing illness, skills in finding missing property, and powers to help avenge wrongs, including those inflicted by slave master. You know, the Negro doctors, that's what they were. Obeah practitioners. Obeah practitioners, some of whom may have been identified as Negro doctors at certain periods, played positive roles within the slave community. They were sought after for their divination abilities, proficiency at diagnosing and healing illness, skills in finding missing property, and powers to help others, powers to help avenge wrongs, including those afflicted by slave masters. That's what Obeah was. And we're seeing what's different by you say you come and you say you have a prophecy. Huh? You come and give somebody medicine to heal. That's what Obeah is. That's what voodoo is. Helping people. That's the true meaning of what it was intended to be. Healing. Telling somebody what's going to happen, what's the cause of their disease. That's what it is. And we're going back to nature. We're going back to nature. So if we're hearing this and we'll be like, oh, that's back then, this is what we're going back to. Very importantly, enslaved person consulted Obeah practitioners to protect them. In the words of Barbados' earliest anti-Obeah law, the phrasing of which was taken directly from the 1781 Jamaican anti-Obeah law, from of any evils that might otherwise happen, Obeah practitioners like African medicine man prepared charms or amulets that could protect against illness or harm, ward off evil, bring good luck, or protect against theft or crops or personal belongings. And yes, so Barbados had this law. I think they all abolished this law. I know Jamaica did a couple years ago, but I think Barbados been long before Jamaica did abolish the law against practicing Obeah. And practicing Obeah is just healing people. Yeah. And practicing Obeah is just healing people. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Obeah people could encounter the effects of sorcery, witchcraft, perhaps even immunize their clients against these evil practices and cure the physical disorders and psychological states or moods intimately linked to beliefs in witchcraft or sorcery. Not all Obeah people could do all of the above, and different practitioners may have specialized in one or more functions as also occurs in West Africa. Yeah, yeah, this is what it was intended to do. This right now we have a society that psychologically the pill's not working basically. The pill's not working to help all the psychological disorders. It's not working because it's just treating the effects of whatever going on in the body. What's the cause? That's the law of the universe. For every cause, there's an effect. So we just comparing modern medicine with Obeah because now we see why Obeah had to be written so poorly about. It had to be, and the countries like the Caribbean. I'm not sure if in the United States there was laws against using Obeah. They had to because they to implement modern medicine, they had to demonize demonize it. And yes, some aspect of it was using, I think, was using to hurt others. But the main purpose of it, as the author states, Obeah means healing. Obeah means healing, to heal. Okay. So this does not deny that the description of contemporary white observers had some basis in fact. Obeah practitioners were sometimes suspected as these writers' grasp of using their powers to harm others. Yeah, I think they did that because this is how human beings are. This is how human beings are. I think that everything good they could turn it into making it bad. The social tensions and pressure within slave communities could make these communities particularly susceptible to witchcraft accusations, as was not uncommon in African societies. Fear, although probably not on as massive a scale as whites claim, must have played a role in the influence held by some Obeah practitioners in the sense that belief system of which Obeah was a part would have conformed to a more general pattern found in many folk or traditional healing systems. Since such a system often involved considerable management of supernatural forces, a widespread, albeit realistic fear exists that healers who are able to control supernatural forces through their own private efforts could use these forces for antisocial as well as helpful purposes. Helpful purposes that is a widespread characteristic of healers in the medical system of the Caribbean slave communities, as well as in pre-colonial Africa, was that the person who knew how to cure illness would also knows how to cause illness. And the good suffer for the bad. Not all would have used it like that. Yet, although certain Obeah practitioners were believed capable of seriously injuring people or causing their death, it must be stressed that these same practitioners could just as easily make people feel better by neutralizing spells believed to have been cast by those who wish them harm. Such a person could exert great power in this community. And this is the power that doctors have. This is the power that doctors have, and they're not even curing anybody. They're not even curing everybody. They're looked up in the community, and it's just the same thing. It's the same thing. They looked up into their community as doctors and doctors and doctors. It's the same thing. The healers, the Obeah man or the Obeah woman, it's the same thing. They looked up in because they can tap into the supernatural power and heal people. They could have. Mm, okay. Yeah, so they were scared that the Obeah people will would have exert such power. And that's the power the doctors have. That's the power the doctors have. Although there is little information on the specific influence that Obeah people had in particular plantation community or settlements, it is doubtful that their influence was based solely on intimidation and fear, as contemporary white writers often claimed, any more than Obeah was a system that was entirely are primarily antisocial, as plantation authorities and whites in general almost universally believed. The evidence suggests that as time passed, whites greatly exaggerated the antisocial dimensions of Obeah and increasingly minimized or totally ignored the positive functions during the slave period and later in the post-emancipation period. Of course, it's colonialism. Of course, they want to capture our country. They want to rule our country. They have to take us from who we truly are. And our leaders went right with them. Our leaders went with them. They take away everything that we have and demonize it and put it in a negative insight so we don't practice it. And they even went as far as creating laws against it. As creating laws against it. And kudos to those Caribbean islands who saw this long time ago before some did. I think even right now some countries have these archaic laws that you can't use Obeah, you can't use supernatural forces to heal yourself. What kind of law is that? Huh? Indeed, by the early decades of the 19th century, when missionary Christianity began to have major impact in British Caribbean, and when talk of the abolition of the slave trade and general slave emancipation intensified, whites increasingly emphasized the evil characteristics of Obeah. Of course because that's what kept them at bay. That's probably why they gave us independence, because they were constantly being the blunt of the Obeah forces. They were using it against the slave masters. They stressed that it was used, in the words of a Barbadian white Creole, to summon up images of diabolical superstitions and related odious rites and practices that allegedly involve communication with the devil and other evil spirits. The army's prejudices of slaves should be respected, recommend a group of progressive Barbadian planters in 1812. But the abominable superstition of Obeah should be depressed as much as possible. You see? And yes, it was used against them. Yes. Yes, but they didn't understand it. So they described it as evil, evil spirits and devil worship, because I've heard stories that voodoo was used. That's how 80 was used voodoo and conquer them and overcame them. It was used against them. So I understood why they wouldn't want this practice to continue. But that doesn't say why our leaders should have went with them, as they should have understood that it was part of who we are, you know? It's part of who we are. Obeah became a felony punishable by death or transportation and was viewed as a monolithic form of sorcery or magic. Yeah. In Jamaica, writers describe it as a potent and irresistible spell, withering and palsying by undescribable terrors, the unhappy victim, and little more than the superstitious dread of power of certain men who are supposed capable of injuring others by certain preparations. It was represented as a species of witchcraft that was dark, barbarous, and disgusting, and was accompanied by all the terrors that the dread of a malignant being and for fear of unknown could invest, as a system founded on the imaginary influence of malignant spirits. Obeah practitioners were considered the agents of the evil spirit who sent disaster, disease, and death. Yeah. And even to this day, I can attest that Jamaicans still have this negative thinking about Obeah. We know we can see where they got it. It was we were indoctrinated to think that's what Obeah was. We didn't do our research. We didn't understood why our ancestors were using this powers. And you look back at it, that's all they had. That's all they had against the colonizers coming and taking everything from them. And after that, they didn't just colonize us physically. They colonized our minds and our thoughts mentally. And that's what Bob Marley talk about. We gotta um emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. They enslaved our bodies and they enslave our minds. Because right now people think Obeah workers, I mean, yes, there's a minority out there that use it for wickedness, but that's not what it was intended. If we truly tap into who we truly are, remember, we're energy beings. Everything around us is consciousness. Everything around us is energy. There's no God outside of us. Everything is within us. So the oracle, I'm gonna use the oracle, or you want to call him the Obeah man, was able to tap into this. And that's why you see in the Matrix, all the movies, we have witches and good witch and this and that. They take it from the same concept they're demonizing. The Oracle in the Matrix was so knowledgeable of the future. Was she an Obeah woman? Uh, uh, was she an Obeah woman? Because she understand the makeup of the universe. We're so lacking in this knowledge. So everybody can lead us in any direction they want to lead us. Let us fear things that we're not supposed to fear. We're fearing things that is naturally us. So instead of we go to the oracle, we're going to the physician, and we're having a $10,000 bill for one night in the hospital. and a 300 bill for one insulin shot, and a $400 bill for one asthma pump. That's what we like. That's what you think God is. That's God is. That's God is nature. We have to understand God is nature. God doesn't operate like how we're operating now. Everything, there's a scripture. It gave us the trees for healing. Dr. Sabi talked about it. It gave us the weed. It gave us everything for healing. The sun for healing, the wind, everything is he gave us to heal our body. But and we're just constantly in a place of oppression and sickness and ill health. And then you spend all this money and then they go home. You know what? The cancer spread. You go home and sit down and wait to die. You know? And when you talk about healing yourself naturally, healing yourself using the power within you, because you're energy beings and God living within you, God live within you. The God you're looking outside of you is within you and can heal you. And you can use the herbs and the weed and whatever to heal you. They call you Obeah man and you wicked. And this is what our ancestors were doing. This is what they call Obeah. They're using the supernatural forces in this realm to heal and to get rid of their enemies too. Yes, they did. And get rid of their enemies that was coming to invade their land. They sure did. Because that's why we read about in Jamaica, oh nanny boil a pot and do all this and that. They're just stirring up energy. Energy is powerful. That this electromagnetic force in this realm is powerful. And that's what we're made up of. That's the God energy. Electromagnetism, electricity represents masculine, magnetism represents feminine. Electricity, magnetism is mother, father, father, mother, God. That's what that is. So that's what they tap into and heal. Okay. The particular zealous tone of these negative attributions and characterizations, which appeared with increasing frequency in primary sources later in the 19th century, reflected a kind of paradigm shift which had been effective, though with greatly varying degrees of success among the evangelized masses following the emancipation in 1834 to 1838. Now, many of the descendants of the enslaved people themselves spoke of Obeah in thoroughly negative terms. Yes, we do. Though not always with the fervor of Thomas Banbury, a Black Jamaican minister who in 1895 published a diatribe against Obeah when he condemned as wicked, immoral, disgusting, and debasing a superstition, the most cruel in its intended designs and most filthy in its practice, the most shameful and degrading in its associates. And yeah, so this minister in Jamaica, Thomas Banbury, who, and I think right now any minister in Jamaica or probably anywhere in the Caribbean would still say this about Obeah. We've been taught, we have been indoctrinated how bad Obeah was. We've been taught how bad it was. So any minister right now, because they don't understand um, the elements, they don't understand who we are. These ministers is probably the same one who's telling you to look outside of you for God. All these ministers right now will tell you the same thing about Obeah. And not saying that yes, people and maybe it's the way it's been used at this time, but the thought, it was already put in our mind how bad it was So even if it's using for good to heal somebody, we won't see it. We wouldn't have seen it. So yeah, such views of Obeah with Jamaica being often used as the model for the West Indies in general infused themselves into the scholarly literature of the late 19th and early 20th century. One writer in 1893 of a issue of a London-based anthropological folklore journal deriving her information from an inspector in the Jamaican police force, reported how various Jamaican laws had suppressed the practice of obeah, but prosecution continued up to the present day. So the fangs of the Obeah man have been drawn, she wrote, and cases of murder are rare, but he still exercises an evil and widespread influence. Austin Clark of the staff of the United States National Museum, the Smithsonian, published a research note in American Anthropologist in 1912 under the sensation title, An an ingenious method of causing death employed by the Obeah man of the West Indies, giving expression to the conventional view of the day. The folklore ethnographer Martha Beckwith, who over 4 summers fieldwork from 1919 to 1924 made the first attempt at a serious study of obeah among Jamaican peasants, concluded that obeah is the religion of the shadow world. This is Martha Beckwith from 1919 to 1924. She's tried to say Obeah is the religion of the shadow world, the religion of fear, suspicion, and revenge. There are many examples. There are many examples of negative characterization in the scholarly literature. In the scholarly literature of the post-World War II era, but it should be stressed that such literature also often provides impact of direct evidence that Jamaicans sought obeah practitioners for socially beneficial ends. Perhaps even more interesting than being meaning given by scholars are the capsule definitions sometimes provided in literature intended for more general audiences. These are usually based on scholarly sources such as those cited above, which themselves depend heavily on biased 18th and 19th century sources and distill obeah to a few essential terms such as witchcraft, a type of negative sympathetic magic. The Jamaican form of African black magic, or the obeah man, is usually involved in witchcraft and evil doing for clients to satisfy their selfish needs. Keith Patrick, Keith Patrick, a British-born former dean of the Faculty of Law of the University of the West Indies, Cavehill, inheriting his views from earlier writers and his reliance on phraseology in West Indian criminal law in general, bluntly concluded that obeah throughout the West Indies is a social evil which is both unchristian and immoral. Yeah, this is the view of obeah right now. Because even yeah, that's how we were indoctrinated. We never it wasn't studied. It was based on colonialism. They were afraid of it, and no one studied it. They it was all to control us. We never thought that it was all to control us. Why it was demonized, you know. And who knows? Everything in Jamaica, people talk, oh, Obeah worker, you're working Obeah army, is this and that. And based on what we know about the law of the universe, it's not. It's not, I'm not saying it can't be used for evil, but it's the law of cause and effect that's causing us these things in our lives, and we think it's someone doing us something. You reap what you sow. The Bible tells us that. You reap what we sow, but we hasn't been taught. That's what religion does. Religion doesn't teach us to be responsible. It's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's fault. And that's why Obeah has gotten such a negative connotation about it, because we our oppressors don't want us to find this power within us to use against these diabolic archaic laws that were there. They don't want us because their ancestors felt it from our ancestors, and it wasn't easy for them. They couldn't stand underneath what our ancestors was doing to them. They're using the elements to fight against them. Where is our fight? When are we gonna rise up? I'm gonna stop here today and probably continue next week. When are we gonna rise up and do some studies for ourselves, autodidactic, meditate and study and see, let your higher self show you, let your the higher who you truly are. Call on that Christ consciousness to show you what this Obeah was about, what it's about. Don't take based on what we've learned or what we heard. If you understand who you are, you understand how Obeah works. You understand that you can manipulate energy because we do it every day, because we create the situation that we find ourselves in. We use energy, our thoughts and our emotions create the life we find ourselves in, and that's what Obeah used: thoughts and emotions, electricity and magnetism. That's what we're using to create our reality. So Obeah is just doing it on a higher form, where you use this energy around us, use it to heal people, use it to understand what's coming, what's next. And yes, they did use it for nefarious reason against each other. But was that the majority? I can't imagine it was the majority. It's like saying the majority of us are thieves. The majority of us are racist, you know. It can't be the majority. So what we did, we threw out the baby with the bathwater. It doesn't matter what aspect of it was good, because we were colonized, and our colonizers told us how bad Obeah is, how bad voodoo is, or what some people call it jinn, some people call it whatever, how bad it is. And we don't do any research. We ran with that. And here we find ourselves under our oppressor's thumb, not just as Caribbean people, not just as African people, not just in the Americas. We were under the thumb of the pharmaceutical companies, we're under the thumb of the hospitals. We are filled with disease. Oh, some of us taking 10 pills because they're treating the effects. They're not treating the cause. And what Obeah did was the opposite. Obeah treated the cause, because they can tell where in your body's lacking that energy. And that's the source of your dis-ease. That's the source of your dis-ease. Go eat more salt. And it's just simple things, as if you I'll do a presentation on that. There's simple things that could ease our disease: sodium chloride, sodium phosphate, just simple things. I'll do a rundown on those. It's not it's not that it's just simple things that cause our disease based on based on our birth sign. We're lacking in certain minerals. We're lacking in certain minerals. All right, so this is my presentation for today. Um, just heard this in my as I'm meditating on healing. I know we're energy bodies. Why do we have this sickness and disease? And it's really coming in my spirit to just do more meditation on it. And I heard Obeah came up in my meditation. I really never thought about it before. I grew up, I heard about it. Listen, I never grew up like anybody Obeah knew, but I heard about it all the time. This is just as the author is describing in Jamaica particular, I know about, I'm not sure about where you live. We still have that negative connotation about Obeah. If this message find you, it's incumbent on you to do your research about this, do your research about this. Fear, God, there's no fear. We have nothing to fear. We don't need to fear anyone. And we don't throw it out because some people, just like the world we live in, went overboard with it and try to hurt others. You know, we don't just throw it out because of that. And because it was used against certain people so we can get our freedom, so-called freedom as they, I don't know what freedom because they're still in our country. And yeah, so-called freedom, it was used against them and they wanted, and it's a and another aspect of it missing too, it's for control, it's to control. This is an aspect of us that they can't control, so it has to be demonized, it has to be seen negatively. So our leaders can make laws against it. And as I said before, kudos to those countries who got rid of those laws against Obeah, against Obeah. Obeah means healing, 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 please. That's what Obeah was meant to mean, Obeah. And I think they said the French version is voodoo. And yeah, our ancestors and used that. And that's all they had. When the colonizers were coming against them with ships and guns and all that, they use nature against them. They use nature, they use the elements against them. All right. And saw that they also used it against each other, and this is where we're at. So, but I'm thankful that we were able to read this. I'll continue this another time. Rest reading about Obeah. And it's so hard to find really, really what you're looking for about this Obeah. You have to know what you're looking for. You have to understand it. Um, else you're gonna get the same thing they were getting in the 18th century, negativity, negativity, negativity about what no Obeah was. All right. Oh, Father, Mother God, we thank you for this knowledge. We thank you for this time of dispensation. You said your children perish because of lack of knowledge. And you said we're going back to nature. This is what going back to nature, depending on ourselves to heal ourselves, depending on ourselves for all our needs, because within us you live, and independent on ourselves, we're dependent on you. So, Father, I thank you for every ears that's going to hear this word, those who heard it today. Father, I pray that everyone will be blessed, everyone will have an open mind and no longer been walking around with what we've been taught over 200, 400 years ago, but what the Spirit is bringing to our mind, is bringing into our life at this time. So we thank you always. Thank you for our communities, our families, those who are in need today, those who are sick today. We always put them before you. And Father, we thank you. Thank you for your blessings. We say thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Yes, so thank you everyone that joined me on Facebook. Um, it says, I am loved by God. How you doing? Good, 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 good. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Be blessed, everyone. Be blessed. Oh, let's go down here.